وأقول في القرآن ما جاءت به آياته فهو الكريم المنزال وأقول قال الله جل جلاله والمصطفى الهادي ولا أتأول.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another of our parents' webinars for the AMAU junior students, that is the parents of the students who are attending our AMAU junior program. And in this webinar, inshaAllah ta'ala, I will be joined, inshaAllah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, by Sheikh Abdul Rahman, who is going to be presenting a topic regarding putting together a plan for your children and the recitation of the Qur'an and memorization of the Qur'an. So that program, inshaAllah ta'ala, is coming up soon. Sheikh Abdul Rahman will be joining us shortly. But I thought what we could start with, because I think for those of us who are in the UK, the timings and what have you, it's a good time to start now, inshallah. What we could start with, inshallah, is we could start with a little bit of Q&A and just get a feeling about where the parents are right now, what the concerns might be, and whether we could address certain issues, so that once Sheikh Abdul Rahman comes, inshallah, we'll be able to really start the topic of the memorization and Qur'an plan for your kids, inshallah. And since that's his specialization, I would rather leave that topic to him, inshallah. But I think we could probably answer some of the questions that the parents might have. I think just while I'm waiting for those questions to come through, from my side, I'm very, very excited that we moved on to a new series of topics. We're doing fiqh as well as hadith. And I'm teaching the older hadith class and the younger fiqh class. The older hadith class has been very, very, very good. What I've seen from the students so far is a lot of interest in the topic of hadith. How do we know hadith are reliable? Where do hadith come from? The chains of narration, even though that was just the introductory topic, but they had a lot of interest in it and there were some excellent questions coming forward. So I was very, very pleased with the response to that. And I'm really enjoying the fiqh classes with the younger kids as well. I think that it's a very simple topic in terms of the prayer, and the book that we've chosen to teach from, Safinat al-Najah, is a very easy book to study. It's bullet point format. So the conditions of the prayer are, the reasons that you can delay your prayer are, the 1, 2, 3, and then it goes like that. So it's very, very easy to study and easy to teach. And so I think the younger kids have really appreciated that. So we have launched our AMAU app. That's a new bit of information for everyone. If you hadn't caught that so far, you can search and get it on iOS App Store as well as Google Play Store. And you have an email with the links as well. And if you go onto the App Store or Play Store and search for AMAU, you can download the app as well. And there is also a course, a Ramadan course, which has been recently released as well, inshaAllah ta'ala. So that is something to keep an eye out for in terms of updates and what have you. So with us starting a new topic, I think one of the questions that is going to commonly be asked is with regard to the previous topics. So what are we going to manage, or how are we going to manage the previous topics? So I think in terms of covering the most essential things that I wanted to cover, I feel like we covered a lot of it. But at the same time, I would love to be able to finish that content. So for tafsir, what happened is that Sheikh Abdul Rahman started from the beginning of the curriculum, and I started from the end of the curriculum. We didn't quite meet in the middle, but almost. We almost met in the middle. And so what I would like to see, inshallah, in the coming weeks is that there is access provided for those who want to watch the other part of the tafsir that they didn't catch. And I guess, inshallah, if there's any surahs missing, I already have those pre-recorded as well. So we hopefully should be able to provide some access for the rest of the content for that, inshallah. With regard to the Aqidah questions, I think in the beginning we were kind of planning to reach around about 50 questions, and I think Sheikh Abdul Rahman reached a little more than me. But we reached around that number a little bit more. I think both of us reached a little bit more. But inshallah, what the plan would be, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, is to finish that off at some point in terms of providing the extra content for that. But that will probably take a little bit longer in terms of time. So I was quite, alhamdulillah, it's nice to move on to a new topic. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll do our very best to try to finish as much of it as we can. But once again, I think the preference on my side is more that the kids understand and really take on board what they've learned, rather than necessarily reaching the very last page in the book. So that would be a big bonus if it can be done. So I think we have our first question coming through. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My main struggle is to maintain momentum. I feel like I'm constantly pushing my just turned 6-year-old daughter, and she's often not motivated. Is this something I should push through, and what's your advice? So I think, 6 years old, mashallah, tabarakallah. It's a great age that and I think there's a balance to be had between pushing and pushing too hard. I think that we have to look at those two separately. So on one side, when you push too hard, the problem is that the child themselves becomes, they become kind of like, they start to dislike their study and they start to dislike learning about Islam. And that's not what we want to achieve. And it's narrated from some of the Sahaba that they said, Habibullah ila ibadihi, make Allah beloved to his servants. So you want them to love the topics, to enjoy the topics. At the same time, on the other side, we can often push our children harder than we think we can. We sometimes set a limit and say, well, I'm not going to push my child here, because I think if I push them, they're not going to study, or they're not going to show as much commitment, or they're going to get bored. So I think you kind of see which side of the scale you are on at this moment in time. And if you feel like you're pushing really hard, and actually what the child needs to flourish is a little bit of breathing space, in the sense of, giving them a little bit of time. And for example, concentrate on just let's learn 2 or 3 things every day. And some of the great scholars of Islam used to do that. Just learn 2 or 3 issues every day. Just, learn 2 or 3 points every day, 2 or 3 ayat every day. So if you feel like you're pushing your child so hard that your child is actually pushing back against you in a way that's harming them, and they could actually have a benefit from a little bit of relaxation, and that will keep them going and keep them motivated, that's one thing. But on the other side, there are many parents who are not pushing hard enough. And so what's happening is they have the impression or the feeling that if I push hard, my child is not going to study. And instead, they're teaching bad habits. So I think always make it fun, make it enjoyable, make it rewarding. Make it rewarding for the child, make it enjoyable. But at the same time, don't be frightened to push a little bit. I do think it's a little bit of give and take. And I do think it depends on the child as well. Because I could imagine, and Sheikh Abdul Rahman is just going to be joining us very soon in the studio, inshallah, that he would say, he would push a lot harder than me. He would push a lot harder than me. And I think some of that depends on your kids. It depends on your kids and the environment they're in and what they are growing up with and the people they're around and the culture that they're within in terms of the family culture. So, but I think those who are not pushing hard enough can always push their kids a little bit harder. And those who are maybe pushing too hard, where they're seeing their kids start to dislike studying and start to really lose motivation for it, then maybe sometimes either just taking a little bit of space for them, or even changing what they're doing, changing their routine a little bit so that they have a bit more flexibility. I think 6 years old is, mashallah, a fantastic age in the sense that they still have that room to, it's not like you're having that problem at 15 or 16. So in that sense, I wouldn't overly worry about it, but at the same time, maybe try both approaches and see which one is best, and try also just changing what you're doing with your child, changing the routine to see if that helps as well. And also focus on the environment, because if a child doesn't want to study as much as you want them to study, it's usually the case that that's because of the environment they're exposed to, like school or their friends, or the habits in the house, or the kind of things people are doing in the house, that can actually have an environment where the child sees that there are alternatives. And, I don't want to study because my friends are playing, and I don't want to study because at school we don't study like this, and things like that. So that's maybe some points to bear in mind. Another question. All of my kids are doing hifz, Allahumma barik, and all are at different stages. I feel the oldest one is 12 and has memorized 14 juz, is starting to complain about memorizing and maybe not as interested as he was before. I'm not sure how to bring him back on track. Sometimes I think it's because he's becoming a teenager and it's getting harder. Yeah, so I think that you've identified some really common problems. One is that it gets harder as you go along. So the feeling is like, look, I'm already struggling to keep 14 juz. How am I ever going to do this? So in that sense, sometimes, again, what I personally find to be good in that sense is, okay, let's spend a couple of weeks and just practice what you have, or let's even slightly reduce your new memorization for a little while, just to allow you to become comfortable with what you've memorized. But I think one of the things really important is to allow them to really enjoy and really take pleasure from that memorization and reading of the Qur'an, and really enjoy it. I think it's so important. Wallahi, it's so important they see the rewards of it. And sometimes with kids, that transitionary period as a teenager is really hard, because they're getting to the stage where they need to start doing things for Allah. But at the same time, praise from the parents, rewards, really making it special for them. I mean, for example, I think with my kids, when they started off, it was a case of, if you memorize a certain amount, we're going to give you some rewards for that, some money for it, a present that you wanted. And then when you get to a certain juz, we're going to have a big party for you. And we're really going to, and that was when they're very little. And then as they get older, it more became maybe to do with, look, you're getting there, you can be hafid of the Qur'an, and that motivation to actually continue. And maybe you're just at that difficult stage of being in the middle, where it feels easier to stop than to continue. I think once you reach 20 juz, it feels easier to continue than it does to stop. Well, I've got 20 juz or 23 juz or 24 juz, I may as well finish the rest. But at that stage, at 14, it's that difficult sort of like, well, maybe there's more ahead of me than there is behind me, and I'm already struggling. But really getting them to enjoy it. One of the things which may not always be possible, and it depends where you are, is getting them involved in either teaching the Qur'an to other people, or getting them involved in leading the salah. So I know for the kids in our masjid who are doing well with memorizing the Qur'an, we do sometimes get them involved in leading the salah at certain times. Even if it's just that one time or something, just to get that motivation that, look, that you're getting something out of it, or to help them, like teaching the other kids who are younger than them, just to increase that motivation. And otherwise, then, if that's not possible, because it depends where you are, it depends how much flexibility you have in the masjid where you are, then I think, them doing it at home as well, like having that responsibility and that position that comes with memorizing the Qur'an. And then also, I think, getting them involved in, as we said, like teaching other people, teaching other younger kids and things like that, just to make them feel that sense of responsibility and so on. And then otherwise, getting them to realize the virtues and the rewards in memorizing the Qur'an. And that's really important, and Allah knows best. But I think if someone's really struggling to get on track, then slowing them down a little bit, giving them a little bit less hifz so they feel more in control of it, and then just getting them to do a lot of revision on what they've already done. That can be really helpful just to give them a feeling of confidence that, look, right now you're ready to push on, inshallah. And Allah knows best. How do I help my 7-year-old daughter learn to read Qur'an? She's slightly dyslexic. She started memorizing but doesn't like to read from the Mus'haf. I can completely identify with that because I'm also slightly dyslexic and I never liked to read from the Mus'haf. In fact, I still remember when I went to Medina and I couldn't read fluently from the Mus'haf. I was really struggling and I used to mix my letters up a little bit like ta and ya and things like that. And I really I remember the students were given a portion of the Qur'an to read. We were told to read, I think, from Surat Al-Dhariyat till the end of the Qur'an, reading from the Mus'haf. And the other students used to find it so easy because they used to be just reading and I couldn't read it. So I had to memorize it and then read with the aid of memorization. So I would still suggest the same thing for her, is that it's absolutely fine. Like, we all learn in different ways. So it's absolutely fine for her to give more emphasis to memorizing and maybe just to read with the aid of listening. For example, for her to listen to an ayah being recited and then practice reading it. Also improving Arabic skills will also help because we can kind of recognize the words more quickly and fill in the gaps when we know the words anyway from the language. So I think all of these things can help. But I think that somebody who's struggling with reading from the Qur'an because of dyslexia, it's fine for them to learn through a sort of more memorization than reading. And until now, I would say that I personally, when it comes to either poetry or anything, that me personally, I would learn from listening before I would learn from reading. And my reading would only be to support what I'm listening. So I need to read, but only to support what I'm hearing. So if that works better for her, then that's absolutely fine. Reading from the Mus'haf, inshallah, she will become Hafid of the Qur'an. And so she will not need, to worry about the mistakes in the reading from the Mus'haf, inshallah ta'ala. How do we support? Okay, so we had another question about dyslexia. So again, I would just emphasize on the second question we had also about dyslexia, is I would just emphasize that to have the memorization lead the way in reading. And the reading will catch up, inshallah. The reading will catch up, even with dyslexia. The reading will catch up. But reading for someone who's dyslexic is a lot easier when you know what it is that you're reading. For example, you're reading something you've already memorized or even partially memorized is easier than reading something you've never seen before. And that's why you'll see me until now. If you watch my videos, you'll see me until now. Sometimes I read a hadith and I'm like, and it gets stuck. The letters, I can't bring them in the right place. And I don't have very strong dyslexia. It's very mild, but it's enough to notice for it to be noticeable for me. So generally memorizing first, and then even if you haven't memorized perfectly, but generally reading will become smoother, and then memorizing really, really well, and reading will become actually enjoyable, inshallah, along with memorization. So it's okay for memorization to lead the way, inshallah. Another question. I love how you bring the social environment as a major factor in the kids' progression. My oldest being surrounded by many kids who completed and pushed him and encouraged him in wanting to compete. The main struggle with one of them is the revision. He memorizes but forgets. We're in Medina and obviously we're in the best environment, but the journey is still challenging. Yeah, subhanAllah, wallah, it's so true. It's so true. Being in an environment where other people are memorizing and pushing you and their expectations, it makes a big difference to a person. But memorizing and then being caused to forget is a normal part of memorizing the Qur'an. It's completely normal. It shouldn't be seen as something which is, really bad or really, that the person doesn't know how to memorize properly. it's actually just a normal part of memorizing the Qur'an. And that's why even when I meet people who we're in the conversation, they'll say like, I'm hafid of the Qur'an. Sometimes I want to stop them and ask them, you really hafid, or you just like, you have memorized? See, there's a difference between hafid and qad hafid. Like one's in the past and one in the present. Yeah. Like there's a difference between someone who says, I memorized it before. Like I memorized Surah At-Tawbah before. And someone who says, read me an ayah from Surah At-Tawbah and I'll finish the surah for you. There's a big, big difference between those two things. And some people even suggest that you need to memorize the Qur'an several times over before it becomes like that. I don't think it's ideal. I think if you're memorizing the same thing over and over again, it's probably a sign that maybe the memorization program isn't quite structured as good as it could be. But I think that it is normal to need to go back and revise and improve and to continuously go back over what you've memorized. And I think the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he described how quickly the Qur'an escapes, more quickly than a camel when its legs are untied. It's very, very easy to lose what you've memorized. And so the easiest way is to actually have two things. First of all, to have more of an emphasis on revision than memorization. Like to actually have more of an emphasis on revision. In other words, a lot of people, when they finished memorizing the Qur'an, for them, that's the end of the journey. Whereas if you have revision as the way that you measure your memorization of the Qur'an is by the quality of your revision, then actually many people would say, I'm not yet hafiz. I haven't yet finished the Qur'an. Because until now, my revision is not as good as it should be. And the drop in standards is really scary. I remember when I was reading Qur'an to my teacher, it used to be, you could make a mistake on a page. You could make a mistake on a page. Or you could make a mistake in a ruba', at least in 2.5 pages. You could make a mistake and your teacher will say continue. When I speak to people who learned 10 years, 20 years before me, their teachers wouldn't allow them to make a mistake except one per juz. Otherwise, they would not allow them to continue. If they make more than one mistake in a juz, they wouldn't allow them to continue. And now I see students whose teachers allow them to make 3, 4, 5 mistakes on a page, and they still continue. And that's really scary. It's that loss of standards and that feeling that if you can just get to the end of the page, you've memorized. So it's about just going back and actually and putting more emphasis on the quality of the revision and the quality of the recall than necessarily finishing the Qur'an. And I would still say to somebody, if you finish the Qur'an, that's a noble goal. You've actually memorized all of the surahs, but now go back and make it really solid. Make it so that you're back to the standards of the people before, where, I heard, some of the brothers talking about the fact that, for example, we read 5 juz of the Qur'an and, the person makes 1 mistake or 2 mistakes. And there are people I personally know who will read 5 juz of the Qur'an and not make a single mistake, not even one. But generally speaking, 1 mistake, 2 mistakes in a large portion. Whereas somebody who is making 4, 5, 6 mistakes on a page and then still continuing on to the next page, that's not going to produce the kind of, quality. And I think also, I remember something one of my teachers said to me, and it's always stuck to me. He said, there are 2 types of hifth. Hifthun sadiq wa hifthun kadhib. There is a hifth that is truthful and a hifth that lies to you. The hifth that lies to you, you, me, or anyone else, we can finish a page, 2 pages, 3 pages of the Qur'an And we can read it perfectly without any mistakes one time. But if you come a week later or 2 weeks later, can you still read that page without mistakes? That's the difference between true hifth and the hifth that's lying to you. It's not telling you the truth. It's telling you you memorize, but it's just short-term memory. And to make something into your long-term memory, you have to actually forget it. Not forget it, because in the Qur'an, we don't say we forgot, but we were caused to forget. You have to be caused to forget it. And then again, you kind of, it comes back into your mind again. And again, it goes a bit shaky. And again, it becomes, cemented in your mind. So all of this is just about having more emphasis on revision and really making revision the metric that you use to measure the progress of someone's hifth. Is not how many surahs have you memorized in the past, but how many can you recite without mistakes today. And that number takes hafiz sometimes down to 2 juz. That's the reality. Some people go from hafiz to 1 or 2 juz, because that's all if we measure it like that, that's all they can do. And yet in their mind, they memorize the Qur'an. So that's something to think about as well. So I don't see it to be a problem that somebody is sometimes losing what they memorized and getting it back again and losing it again and getting it back again. But just give the emphasis to the process of getting it back rather than just finishing all of the surahs at one point in a person's life, and Allah knows best. Is it more important to concentrate on hifth or understanding Qur'an for children? So for children, it's more important to concentrate on hifth. And that's because a child's capacity for understanding is limited. Now, we don't mean it's not zero, it's just limited. And so their capacity for memorization is very high, and their capacity for understanding is relatively low. And so we should optimize our teaching for that by giving them lots and lots of memorization and just a little bit of understanding. As they grow older, their ability to understand increases. So, for example, what you understand at for example, 6 years old is very different to what you understand at 12 years old, is very different to what you understand at 16 years old, is very different to what you understand at 18, at 20, and so on. Your ability to actually understand things and really delve into them, it takes time to develop that. Whereas memorization tends to get worse the older you get. So ideally, the younger they are, we really push them on memorization and we give them the understanding they need at that moment in time. What do they need at that moment in time? So, for example, you will see kids who've memorized a text in fiqh, and they can list you all of the things that break the fast one by one, but they themselves actually personally, on a personal level, only know about eating and drinking. If I'm not allowed to eat, I'm not allowed to drink, because that's what they need at that moment. The other things that break the fast, they don't concern them, and they're not experiencing them, so they don't need them at that moment in time. So from their personal level, they just know that from my knowledge, I'm just not allowed to eat and drink. But if you ask them to list all of the things that break the fast, they say, and the things that break the fast are 7, and they list them like that, one by one, like without a mistake, because their ability to memorize is greater than their ability to understand. So in that sense, I believe that you should maximize your child's ability to memorize at an early age. And for understanding, give them what they need. I'm not saying don't give them anything, but give them what they need in an age-appropriate way. Whereas memorization, it doesn't really have an age-appropriate level. It's more like as much as they can take at that age. Whereas understanding has age-appropriate levels. Like there are things they cannot understand at 10 years old, at 12 years old, at 15 years old, and so on. And Allah knows best. Is there any proven method or recommended way to teach an ADHD child the Qur'an? It gets very difficult for both the child and the parent. I can't say that I've tried to teach a child with ADHD the Qur'an, but I do have a lot of experience of working with children who have ADHD, generally speaking. I feel that some of the answer is down to the general things that people tell you on the ways that you can teach a child with ADHD. So the general tips and tricks that people tell you, which are not related to the Qur'an, some of that can be applied in terms of how to, increase the length of time that they can focus and how to, to structure around them. But I feel like it's just about two things. First of all, structuring the learning around the way that works for them. It's very difficult to ask someone to learn in a style or a method which isn't suited to them. For example, a dyslexic child, asking them to read everything from the Mus'haf. That's one aspect to it. So finding a way that works for them, even if it's not conventional or even if it's not how the other kids learn Qur'an, it works for them. That's one thing. And the second thing is that not burdening someone with more than they can bear. That's another aspect. I wonder whether, personally, I believe that, Ruqya Shar'iyya, generally speaking, would help a child with ADHD, inshallah. I don't see why not. And we have such a narrow view of Ruqya. We see it only as jinn possession and magic. And, Ruqya is to be used for all kinds of conditions, including medical conditions and attention disorders and everything. So some Ruqya for them might help to allow them to calm down and gain an attachment and a love for the Qur'an and to love to listen to it. And then, slowly to work on a way of learning it with them that helps them, inshallah, that works for them. I know it's a bit vague, the answer, but it does depend a lot on the child. But I just feel like if they really struggle with a conventional approach, then sitting them down and trying to give them the same approach that other children have, it is going to be very difficult. Whereas maybe getting them used to the Qur'an, maybe some ruqya upon them and they're getting settled with the Qur'an, is helping them to maybe give that a little bit more attention to it, inshallah. And then, finding a way and a method that works for them in terms of their recitation and learning from the Qur'an, inshallah, as well as benefiting from what people, the general guidelines that, people give, people who specialize in education for people with learning difficulties and things like that, and the tips and tricks they give, and see whether some of those could be applied to the learning of the Qur'an in a non-conventional way that would help them to be able to take on board more of the Qur'an, inshallah. وَلَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Allah doesn't burden a person with more than they can bear. I think we have Sheikh Abdul Rahman is here with us. Do we have, I don't know if we can we bring him onto the call right now, or is he taking a little bit of time to set up? So if you can give me the audio on there so I can hear Sheikh Abdul Rahman a little bit.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته شيخ.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته شيخ عبد الرحمن.
كيف حالك شيخ؟ نور الله وجهك
وأحسن الله إليكم.
اللهم آمين شيخ. May Allah honor you في الدنيا والآخرة.
آمين آمين آمين. Sheikh, I'm just wondering, I'm just seeing here, I'm on my feed here, I can't see your video. Is that something, or are you joining us by audio only?
No, yeah, the videos, I think the people see.
That's why I've got a little monitor down here where I can see what the people can see, and I'm not seeing, unless mine is just not updating perhaps. Let's just check. We'll double check with the AMAU team before we start.
Yeah.
Can you see?
Yeah, the people that can see.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Excellent. Fantastic. Sheikh, we've just been taking some Q&A with the parents, and we wanted to talk a little bit about the plan, making a plan for the children with regard to the Qur'an. And Sheikh, this is your area of expertise. So I really wanted you just to present to them and give them some ideas, inshallah. And I'll just from time to time, I might have some questions to ask you or some points to raise, inshallah.
BarakAllahu feek, Sheikh, inshallah. May Allah honor you في الدنيا, Sheikh Ahmed, Sheikh Muhammad. الحمد لله رب العالمين له الحمد الحسن والثناء الجميل وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له يقول الحق وهو يهدي السبيل وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm just going to add on what Sheikh Muhammad has already, mashallah, pointed out and bi'idhnillahi al-kareem elaborated and said. I was listening to his kalam, mashallah, on the way, and now that I was here, I was also listening. There's a few points I organized, inshallah ta'ala, and I wanted to share with you all, bi'idhnillah al-kareem, when it comes to hifdh and memorization. So it's something over the years that I collected for my teaching towards my children and for my own memorization of the Qur'an. So it's 8 points, inshallah ta'ala, when it comes to points in order to memorize the Qur'an. And there are 2 things that people are looking for when it comes to Qur'an for themselves and for their children. It's sur'atul hifdh wa itqanul Qur'an. Yani to memorize it quickly, and also to make that the Qur'an that you've already memorized, to basically keep it and make sure that it's mutqin, and it's perfection. The first point, the first advice I would give is the Qur'an that you're memorizing should be from a mushaf wahid. So the scholars, they call it mushaf muwahhadun fi tab'ihi. Yani the taba'a you're using, the copy that the child's going to use from the mushaf, it should be the one that he started with and the one he finishes with. My children have never changed their mushaf. I made sure that they don't. Their mushaf rips, we work on it, we cover it properly, but that's going to be their mushaf through the entire process of their memorization. Why? Because it helps in rusukh al-hifdh. And there's some athar and some kalam. Ibn al-Jawzi mentions some of it in his kitab Sayyid al-Khatir. The second one is the memorization has to be on the hand of ala shaykhin mutqinin, a teacher who's alert, who knows the Qur'an, who's going to not only just correct the child's memorization, but he's also going to correct the child's pronunciation and articulation of words. So that's the second, okay? Because the teacher can hear things. He can see mistakes that the child is making. And the more that the teacher's qualified and more he knows, the more he catches on those mistakes. The third one is لِيَكُنْ حِفْظُكَ يَوْمِيًا. You have to make sure that the memorization of the Qur'an is daily. So it doesn't have to be like a page a day. Whatever you're memorizing, but you should make it in-daily. The reason why that is because Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, he says al-inqita' يُضَعِّفُ الْحِفْظَ وَيُضَعِّفُ الْهِمَّةِ. If you disconnect from something, it weakens the memorization and it also weakens what? The aspiration. The continuation is very good. The fourth point is التكرار يا إخوة. Repetition. And Imam al-Bukhari was asked, what is the medicine to memorization? And he said, I don't know anything after the person's willingness better than at-takrar, repetition. So at-takrar, repetition is the key and it's the solution. Honestly, when people ask me, how can I solidify my Quranic memorization? I don't know anything else to say other than takrar, repetition. Number 5, let the memorization start from Surah An-Nas ila Surah Al-Baqarah. That tariqah is the best. Especially the child, he learns quickly to finish surahs from surahs to surahs, because why is the Qur'an even categorized into surahs? Is when the human feels like he accomplished something and he finished a surah and he's moving to the next, it feels good for the child. I've seen it with my children. Once they finish a portion and they go to the next surah, they like it. I'm starting a new surah, Dad, did you know that? They'll tell you, so they're happy. So Surah An-Nas ila Surah Al-Baqarah, the scholars, they say Hifdhul Ibtida', that should be it. Like when it comes to Hifdhul Muraja'ah, Baqarah ila An-Nas. When you do Muraja'ah, it should start from Baqarah to Nas. But when you're starting the memorization of the Qur'an, whether you're young, whatever you are, start from Surah An-Nas ila Surah Al-Baqarah. Number 6 is إذا ضاق الوقت. If there's not much time for memorization for anything new, so if you're in a situation where time is restricted and you have to choose between learning something new or revising, my advice is muraja'ah. What you've already memorized is more important than something new. So if I see my child, what he's memorized before is weak, I like to stop. I love stopping. And we're going to do muraja'ah. Going forward and just forward and forward and forward, is, without keeping strong what you memorize, is not of a lot of benefit. Number 7. The second 7 point is لا تنتقل من حفظ إلى حفظ. Don't move from one hifz to another hifz. What do I mean by that? Don't move to a jadid unless you solidify the past. Okay, which is what I've already kind of mentioned in the 6th point. And the 8th and final point, inshallah ta'ala, is don't feel heartbroken if the child is still weak after the first time he finishes the Qur'an. Anybody who's memorized the Qur'an and finished the Qur'an will know that their first memorization wasn't that strong. That's why the scholars, they call it حفظ التجميع. You just compile the Qur'an. You haven't really memorized it properly. And that's why مرحلة التجميع, that stage of just all the Qur'an, is going to be da'if. So when your child says, I finished the Qur'an, and you can still see mistakes, don't worry. He's going to start feeling like he's finished the Qur'an on the 4th and the 5th time. That's in terms of principles and rulings I wanted to mention here. Now I want to mention the second point, which is مقدار الحفظ اليومي. How much should a child memorize every day? Okay, that's what a teacher should appoint the child. This is not a test. This is not a competition. He's not racing with anybody. Allah hasn't made the people's hifz the same. Someone's hifz is very strong, another one is hifz is very weak. So it changes from one person. And I initially started my children with half a page, and we made our way from there. So we started with half a page and we made our way up. But if a child is memorizing a page, that's decent, that's good. That's not very bad, as some people may say. It's decent, it's all right. The more the better. But if he's doing a page a day, that's good. But that page has to be mutqin. And very well, he has to read it to you. Of course, he's a child. He's going to forget it after a few months later. He's going to forget again. Your job is just to keep going over it again and again and again. The second point I want to say is, my advice is don't increase the child's hifz more than 2 pages. It's one of the things I did wrong. It's one of the mistakes I did. I was going fast to finish it, so I got 4 pages, 5 pages squeezed in. That's not a good advice. I realized لا تزيد, don't increase from صفحتين to صفحة, because there's it's no race. And these are just personal advices, because the scholars, there's a قاعدة I came across, من حفظ سريعا نسي سريعا. That's the قاعدة. Anyone who memorizes fast forgets it fast. Last point, inshallah ta'ala, and then we can take the Q&As, inshallah ta'ala, whatever's left over. طريقة حفظ القرآن, when it comes to the method of memorizing the Qur'an, as I said, when we say memorization of the Qur'an, is 2 things we're trying to look for. سريع الحفظ, fast in memorization, سرعة الحفظ, and itqan. We want to get those 2 together, inshallah ta'ala. So as fast as the person can memorize and also have it strong, there are basically few things that a person needs to observe. The first thing we have to keep in mind is that the Qur'an is divided into 2 when it comes to memorization. Ayat which are known as ayat mutashabiha. Ayat that are look-alike. Those are tricky. And ayat which are not mutashabih. They don't resemble one another. A person who memorizes the Qur'an, what tricks him a lot and catches him off guard is the ayat which are mutashabiha. I think that could be another discussion in another time, how to do it. There's a lot of people who've now started to buy books that have all of those ayat mutashabih and they try to memorize it from it. I'm anti that. I'm not for that. I like the ayat mutashabih to be learned from the Qur'an yourself. You start picking up those ayat mutashabih. So you're reading Surah Al-Qasas and you see the story of Musa alayhi salam be mentioned here. It's similar to Surah Al-Taha, وهكذا. Surah Al-Sad is mentioning the story of Iblis. And then Surah Al-A'raf is also mentioning the story of Adam and Iblis. And Surah Al-Baqarah is also mentioning it. And so then it resembles one another. I like to see it myself and I pick up the differences. I think that's but like in one time being given the entire ayat mutashabiha, ayat that look alike, and you're told to memorize it as a list, it doesn't last long. But again, it changes from one person to another. So these are the steps I took with my kids when it came to the method of memorizing the Qur'an. Each ayah, I made them read it 20 times. So for example, the child reads Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. He reads it 20 times looking at the Mus'haf. Now when he reads it 20 times looking at it from the Mus'haf, I put my hand on it and I say, hey, read it now from memory. So my son or my daughter, she reads it from memory 20 times. And then I now say, okay, let's move on to the next ayah. Look at the ayah again, read it 20 times from the Mus'haf. Let me hear it 20 times. And then I tell them, I put my hand on it and I say, read it 20 times from memory. If it happens within those 20 times, if they do one time mistake, we have to read it again from looking 20 times. I need 20 pure, no mistakes. If they do one time mistake, we go back again from looking. Now, when they do two ayahs, so Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, those are two verses, 20 times, 20 times. So it's 40. I put my hand on it both and I say, I need you to read those two verses together now. Okay, and they read it together, and that's how we carry on connecting all the verses together. If it happens that whatever verse they get wrong, we put our hand on it again and we say, read it 20 times. Because when it comes to memorizing, there's two things that happen. You know the verse, but you forget the verse after it. So its connection is also important. That's why I keep bringing it back to the previous one. And I keep bringing it back to the previous one. And I keep bringing it back to the previous one. So there's a connection between the ayat. Some people, what they do is they memorize this verse, and they move it to the next 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 verse. And what happens is they can't connect the verses. They know each verse by itself, but they're not connecting it. So I need it to be connected. Another thing I focus highly on, and it's one of the things you can trick a person who's a hafiz, is the ending of an ayah from a safha to the other page that it connects with. A lot of people get confused here. Again, it comes to the issue of what? Connecting. And this, I make sure my children don't do that mistake, because we make sure that we spend a lot of time with the last verse on the page to the verse that's starting on the other page. Now, this is very important in the matter I mentioned before, which is do not change the copies of your mushaf. If you do, some of the mushafs are different with ayah starts in the page. And that's not what you want for the child. You don't want tashattut to happen to the child. And inshallah ta'ala, that's all I wanted to share for now. And Allah knows best, subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Shaykh Abdurrahman, Jazakallahu khairan wa BarakAllahu feekum. Shaykh, I actually wanted to ask you a quick question or two. There's a couple of different types of parents, I think. There's a couple of different situations you have. One situation where the parent is supporting a teacher who is teaching their child the Qur'an. And the other situation where the parent doesn't have a teacher and they're taking the responsibility to be like the teacher. So just some advice on those two different situations and how the parents can manage it. Those who have, their child has a Qur'an teacher, so how can the parent support that teacher? And the situation where the parent, as much as they have memorized, they have to be the teacher for their child. They didn't find a teacher for them.
So the way I look at it, Sheikh Muhammad, is both situations, the person is always required and needed to be the teacher, whether there's a teacher there or not. The load is always less when there's a teacher, but you are always helping the teacher memorize. You always have to be involved when it comes to the child's memorization. It's a must. We have a teacher who comes to our children and teach them Qur'an. مثلا, we will be, especially my children when they were in Egypt, I wasn't there, I was here. So they were learning. The teacher sets them the Qur'an. He makes them learn it, but when they leave him, their mother has to sit down and help in their memorization. So she has to be involved. She has to teach them, she has to get the recording, she has to get... So what we did was, we got them Sheikh Mahmoud Khalil al-Husari. Some of my kids like Sheikh Mahmoud Khalil al-Husari, and some of them, they enjoy Muhammad Sadiq al-Manshawi. This is the parent who doesn't even know Qur'an themselves. No problem. Allahumma barik, there are a lot of means you can take. You get the recording, the child puts the headphones in, and he listens to it. There's a Qur'an apps you can get, and they play the verse, each verse 40, 50 times. Muhammad Sadiq al-Mashawi or Mahmoud Khalil al-Husari. The person listens and listens and listens and listens, the child. The mother, if she can read from the Mus'haf, she says, come here. And the mothers are the ones that do the most jobs. May Allah preserve them. The mother opens the Mus'haf and she says, read the Qur'an. He reads to her. If he's not doing it properly, she tells him, go back again and listen again. That's a method that the mother has to use before the teacher comes, because the teacher needs the child prepared, ready. Don't ever think to yourself that the teacher is responsible of making your children memorize the Qur'an. I think the teacher's job is that he's the final corrector. He gets rid of all of those mistakes that the child's picked up. But you make the memorization come into place. So there's two things the child has to come with: memorization and the way he pronounces it. The teacher's job is to get all of those mistakes out, but the hifdh per mother has to do it. If the parent doesn't have a teacher at all, then all of that becomes their responsibility, and that has to be a parent who really knows how to recite the Qur'an, how to recite the Qur'an, whose pronunciation of the Qur'an is good, someone like that is teaching the child the Qur'an. I hope I've answered the question, inshallah ta'ala, Shaykh.
Jazakallahu khairan. The question was answered very well. We had a couple of questions from the parents, and they said, regarding children who can't read yet. So a child who's maybe either struggling to read or a child who hasn't learned to read, should they be giving precedence to learning to read first, or can they start memorizing without being able to read?
So this is a mistake I fell into. Honestly, I have to put my hand up. There was a sheikh I met in the UK, and we were talking, and this was when my children were very young, and he said to me, can your kids read from the Mus'haf? And I said, they're still young. My oldest was at that time 3, and I said, I'm not going to busy myself with making my children learn how to read from the Mus'haf. I'm going to straight away get them into memorization. He said to me, don't do that. Let them 1 year spend reading and writing from them, they know how to read the Mus'haf. Honestly, we had our back and forth. I disagreed and I left. So my oldest daughter, I didn't do that with her. And I really regretted it. And I always remember him, that he was right and I was wrong. If the child can read from the Mus'haf, a lot of the work is taken from you. It's very important that he can read from the Mus'haf. Because the child, when he's memorizing, there are things that have to be in place. Number 1, he has to see what he's memorizing. 2, he has to hear what he's memorizing. And 3, he has to recite it loud that he can hear. And all of those 4 skills have to be working together, which is the eyes, the ears, the eyes, the ears, and the mouth are all working together in order to memorize the Qur'an. And those 3 is what the Prophet ﷺ prohibited a person to use in haram, to listen to music and things like that, because it's what gets into the heart. The eyes, to look at what is haram, and to speak that which is wrong. All 3 of them have an effect on the heart. And the heart is where you memorize from. All this Ibn Qayyim mentions in Kitab al-Bada'i al-Fawaid. So when he said you read the Qur'an, he said that the person looks, recites loud so they can hear it. Their ears have to hear it. And there has to be articulate recitation of those verses. So I never let them just sit there and look at the mushaf and their lips are just slightly moving. There has to be a loud recitation where I can hear it from the other room. Because sometimes I'm in the other room and I'm doing my work and I can hear them reading and there's a mistake in it. I run from this room to the other room and I say, what do you say? Repeat it. Wrong. Look at the mushaf. So it's important that takes place. So, Sheikh, what was the question?
Now that was it. That was it, Sheikh. You answered the question perfectly. There was some good questions came up. If you don't have access to your mushaf, maybe you're traveling, you're outside, is it okay to use the phone to recite the Qur'an from? I want to take your thoughts on that, Sheikh. I'm going to add something to it, but I want to first see if you think it's even okay at all to do that.
Sheikh, I'm anti that. I'm totally against it. Totally, when it comes to reading the Qur'an from the mobile phone. And personal experience, every time I read it, I get distracted from it. It's a distracting thing for even me, let alone anyone else. Yeah, and you'll always go back to an app and just say, let me just check the WhatsApp and who's messaged me. And it's easier to just quickly switch it or put it back in your pocket. So really, when I know I want to read the Qur'an and I'm really serious, I would pick up the Mus'haf. So for me personally, my own opinion is I would only read the Qur'an mobile from the Qur'an when it's like 3-4 pages that I want to quickly finish off from my daily muraja'ah. But I fully make sure that the Qur'an is read from a Mus'haf. And I would never let my children read the Qur'an from an app. It's always a Mus'haf.
The other thing is that it's going to come the same problem of the words being different on different pages. It's even harder with the app because you don't have you don't even have a reference for what's. In fact, when you're reading from the app, you don't even know what the left side of the page or the right side of the page is. But if you must read, I still feel like you have to be careful about the same mushaf. So you get the same mushaf with the same words on the same page. It's not ideal, but maybe that's the best a person can do in that sort of situation. But definitely don't just, I see people reading from apps where the Qur'an is not even written in the khat of the mushaf. It's not even written in the writing of the mushaf. It's written just like as a printed Arabic text. It's very hard to read from. There's no way that they'll be able to memorize like that. So that's an important point. Sheikh, there's a very good question, and I really wanted to take something on this from you. So the best way to teach an entire class of kids to memorize the Qur'an, if you have someone who's teaching a big group of kids to memorize, do they recite together? The teacher recites, the student repeats. And Sheikh, if you have time to tell us about this particular thing that I've seen you doing of each person finishing one ayah, the next ayah, that would be good as well, inshallah.
When it comes to Qur'an being taught from the beginning, the teacher should really have a little number of students. The number of students that the teacher has should be very limited, like a little amount. لذلك, I even say parents, if they've got a lot of kids, alhamdulillah, Allah has given them a lot of kids, if they are financially able to maybe get 2 teachers, okay, and not give all the kids to one teacher, because it's hard for the teacher to give justice to their children. But the way I try to work with it is that muraja'ah is always easy. Muraja'ah is we're all going to be taking a verse. So I'm going to take one verse. My other daughter is going to take another verse. And we do that. And we cover a lot of verses like that. So everyone's going to take a verse. And we even try to do at the ending of each verse, which is a reason why I do this, is because I realize kids, they don't listen, they lose their concentration. Sometimes they see something and then they say, what ayah did you read? And then that all the time the ayah has to be repeated. So what we do now is the last portion of the verse is recited. So he has to recite it, all of us recite it together, even if it's not my verse. At the last portion, and then the other person carries on. For example, I say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The other one goes, he carries on, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. We all come in. Just so we all know that ayah is finished. We're alert. It keeps the child alert because he's going to be reading the ending of everyone's surah. And that's culturally, what we do back in our country, Somalis, they call it horin. It's basically everyone comes in at that last point. It really helps, even that though if a person is trying to get closer to Allah by doing that, of course it becomes an innovation, but it really keeps the child alert that that verse is person's taking and that person's taking that verse, and they can correct that person's verse because they're alert and they're aware of where we are at. That's beneficial when it comes to muraja'ah. Like when it comes to Jadid, as I said, I'm making this child read this verse 20 times from looking at the Mus'haf, and then 20 from memory, and there are like 7, 8 kids, 9 kids to go through. The person won't be able to keep doing that. And one thing I really advise no one to do is this idea of just giving the child a Mus'haf and saying, go do it yourself. They will never do that. They won't, kids will not go into their room and do their job. There has to be, do it in front of me, Hiya, carry on, Hiya, you read. And you have to put everything else aside and literally sit down, cross your feet and read with them. The issue of muraja'ah, it can happen anywhere. Randomly, we pick any random place and we're going to do subah on that on the road. It can be anywhere. But at home, we've got a program where we follow and we try to finish the Qur'an like that. But on the road, we're driving, I'm going to pick somewhere and we're going to do subah from, we call it subah, verse by verse. We have to be ready. So that's another way of doing it.
Okay, so we've got some more questions. Pausing memorization to catch up with revision. At what point can you completely pause memorizing to catch up with revision, or should it always be you're always memorizing something? How should it be with that?
So the way we do it is that when you finish a surah, there's something called jam'ah. So the surah you finished, you're not going to move on to the next surah unless you've given me the whole surah properly. And that is you reading that whole surah by yourself. So you've done a page. You've now finished. You're not going to move on to the next surah unless you give me this whole surah properly. And then when the juz is finished, there's a jam' of the juz. You're not going to move on to the next juz unless this entire juz is sharp. Again, that has to be your own reading. I'm going to listen to all of it from beginning to end. Okay? But then there's also subah that's going on every day. So my son has now finished the Qur'an, alhamdulillah. So he starts with the Baqarah. My other daughter, she just finished the first juz of Surah Al-Baqarah. She's in Surah Al-Baqarah. She's going to finish Baqarah and she's finished the Qur'an. So she's read up to سَيَقُولُ سُفْهَاءُ مِنَ النَّاسِ مَا وَلَّهُمْ. She comes in with that subah because we're doing a juz a day, مثلا. Example. She comes in. If we carry on after سَيَقُولُ سُفْهَاء in Surah Al-Baqarah, she doesn't have, it's not her, she hasn't reached there, so she stops. So me and my son, we choose to go through all Surah Al-Baqarah. My oldest daughter will come in up to Sayqul Sufha. Then she drops out because that's not her Jadid. She hasn't reached it yet. So we carry on, me and my son. Then Ali Imran starts, she comes back in. She's already done Ali Imran. But also my other daughter is going to join in. And we carry on, we reach Surah Mathalan, Surah Al-Fath. Talha comes in and he joins in with us. Is in Surah Al-Fath. That happens every 15 days. We try to finish the Qur'an like that. So when we finish the Qur'an like that, everyone's going to come into where they're at. That's already happening. But on top of that, Talha is finishing from Surah Al-Fath ila Surah Al-Nas. He's doing that every week, regardless of a subah coming up. The muraja'ah is what we give more importance to. But I said something which is never, ever, in no case do I believe, can a person finish the Qur'an the first time and it's itqan. I don't think that can happen. I tried everything. It becomes da'if the first time. It's going to be weak. However strong you think it is, it's still weak. He's only going to really be solid the 4th and the 5th time. Today, subhanAllah, while I was just looking at my notes, I came across the biography of Ibn Hamuyat al-Sarakhsi, one of the ruwat of Sahih al-Bukhari. They said he memorized the Qur'an at the age of 80. He was 80 years of age and he finished the memorization of the Qur'an, and they said it took him 20 years to do it. He started when he was what? 60. 20 years he's been trying to go over it. When he was 80, they said he could write the Mus'haf, all of it from memory. We have to also understand that it's continuation and it's consistency and it's back and forth, and it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle.
Jazakallahu khairan. A lot of people asking about tajweed, and people asking how important is it that the child's tajweed should be very accurate and proficient before they start memorizing, and some people who are stuck on memorizing because their teacher is not happy with the standard of their tajweed, and how to fix that.
So when it comes to the issue of a tajweed, I've put some notes together regarding it. I believe the tajweed, some of the scholars have prohibited something known as al-mubalagha, to go extreme in it. Some people they make their children go extreme. Al-Halwani, Shamsul A'imma, Al-Halwani, he said, وَلَوْ قَرَأَ الْقُرْآنَ فِي صَلَاتِ بِالْأَلْحَانِ إِنْ غَيَّرَتِ الْكَلِمَةَ تفسد صلاته فإن كان في حرف المد واللين وهي الحرف وهي الواو والألف والواو وهي الياء والألف والواو ولا يغير المعنى لا تبطل إلا إذا فحش. And if you look at the kalam of the ulama, they weren't too harsh on the issue of slip of the tongue, little mistakes here or there. Yani reading like Husari and conditioning that the child has to be like Husari, it's a dream. But we have to also understand it's not always going to be the case. We work our way towards it. And I've seen some people who are extreme, where the child comes, and a certain teacher one time was given a child to teach the Qur'an, and he spent like 4 months making the child memorize Surah Al-Fatiha. And he would just pick up another mistake. And he would pick up another mistake. And he would pick up another mistake. And Allah doesn't like ghulu and extreme. I think everything has to be done with moderation. But the tajweed is important. With that being said, the tajweed is important. And a parent has to understand they shouldn't let certain mistakes slip through. There are things Somalis fall into when they read the Qur'an. Like for example, Somalis are not fluent when it comes to reciting the tha. They're not good with the tha, so they say sa, summa, instead of thumma. So like when you're teaching a Somali, you know that automatically. You're aware, you're looking for those mistakes. UK English speakers, they can't say the dal properly. They say ghal. Like the dal doesn't come out properly.
Muslims.
Yeah?
Muslims.
Yeah, so some letters are pronounced in a way. So Malik Yawmiddin, dal doesn't come out properly. That's what I've seen. When it comes to the subcontinent, for example, the dhal is like a za. So ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ would be read as what? ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ, for example. So these kind of things have to be eradicated and removed out of people's pronunciation of the Qur'an. Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah, he does mention the Qur'an is obligatory, he says, that it has to be done with tajweed. And Allah says in the Qur'an, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, recite the Qur'an with tartil. But again, al-mubalagha, to go extreme in that matter, I feel like we should avoid it. But there's sometimes that happens where we're a bit extreme when it comes to those issues.
BarakAllahu feekum, Sheikh. The child who's going to school, how much time should the parent dedicate each day for a child who's already going to school and coming back and spending the whole day in school? How much time during the day for the Qur'an?
So again, put a note what I put together. I want to give you guys a breakdown of the Qur'an. When a person starts from Surah An-Nisa, Surah An-Nas, ila Surah Al-Ahqaf, every single day, nisf juz, there has to be muraja'ah. From Surah An-Nas ila Surah Al-Ahqaf, that's the first 5 juz. Sah? There has to be a daily, whether you go to school or not, you have to have half a juz of muraja'ah. The second one is from Surah Al-Jathiyah ila Surah Al-Ankabut, وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ. Okay, which is another 5 juz. You have to have what? you have to have juz muraja'a every day, where you do subah. From Surah Al-Qasas ila Surah Al-Kahf, there has to be a what? There has to be juz'un wa nisf, 1 juz and a half of muraja'a. This is not jadid, muraja'a. Once the child reaches min Surah Al-Isra ila Surah Al-Tawbah, innama as-sabilu. From Surah Al-Isra ila innama as-sabilu, there has to be what? Juz'ani, daily, 2 juz. من سورة الأنفال واعلموا أن ما غنمتم من شيء فأن لله خمسه وللرسول up to سورة المائدة لتجدن أشد الناس, there has to be 2 juz and a half. من سورة النساء إلى سورة البقرة of the entire Qur'an, there has to be 3 juz revision. If you're not doing this, your Qur'an's gone. Your Qur'an is what? It's gone. You're not going to get the Qur'an back. That's the tariqah to itqan al-Qur'an. Whether your child goes to school or whether he doesn't, if your child is not reading from memory 1 juz and a half daily, it's going to all fly out of his, he's going to full fly out of him. Now, that's what I think in terms of the muraja'ah. In terms of the jadid, Sheikh, personally, I'm soft. If a child reads to me 3 ayahs a day, no problem. You can go as slow as you want. Okay, but the muraja'ah is where I'm gonna get very staunch on.
That's the thing. I think the parents sometimes we don't realize the Qur'an, if we say approximately 600 pages of the Mus'haf, give or take, and we say that every page has 15 lines approximately on it, it's very, even doing 3 lines a day, your child will finish the Qur'an in a reasonable, in a frame of time which is way less than the frame of time that we as parents are looking back and saying that, or if I had the chance again, I would have memorized 3 ayahs a day, I would have finished the Qur'an by now. So sometimes people don't realize how much you can achieve even with memorizing very little, as long as the revision program is strong enough to be able to keep that memorization in, stop them from losing it, inshallah. Sheikh, I had one more question, I think, which was, there's a lot of questions, wallah, they're very, very good questions. But there was a question here, which is regarding the kids who struggle with motivation. So sometimes very young kids, 6 years old, 7 years old. And I gave an answer earlier, but I think my answers might be a little bit soft. In terms of how do you keep them motivated, and how do you struggle when your younger kids don't want to memorize that day, or they have good days and bad days?
Sheikh, when it comes to motivation, I think it comes back to the parent himself. I feel like my children's motivation is in accordance to my motivation. If I'm very motivated, they are motivated. If I'm not motivated, they won't be motivated. I think the best Qur'an time that we've had has always been when I've been that day up to scratch and I was following the schedule and I wasn't late and I was up to, everything has gone smooth. When I, as a father, was not doing my portion of the Qur'an and I wasn't doing my revision, it has an effect on the child. It's going to make him feel, and if dad's not doing it, that means we don't have to do it. And they follow you. They follow you exactly to the T. So I think parents should take that on board. And the child gets from your energy. I remember when it came to memorizing Surah Ar-Rahman, Surah Ar-Rahman is one of the hardest surahs because of فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. It comes a lot. So there is a rumuz in it. Rumuz meaning it has letters. There's acronyms for us to memorize it. We have khar is called khirmi, tayayafun. Khirmi, the kha stands for something. خلق الإنسان. Khir, the ra is رب المشرقين ورب المغربين. Mim, مرج البحرين. It's all after فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. Sayayafun, the sin stands for something. The ya stands for something. The other ya stands for, the fa stands. Each letter stands for. So when we're reading, we're like say. So my son saw me memorizing it and getting it because I used to do it when we were young. Is in madrasa. This is a way to memorize. This is what's going to help you to keep the memory. So within a day, he memorized it. When we're doing Surah Ar-Rahman, his memorization, it's easy for him because he follows those letters, those rumuz. So I think motivation of the parent themselves and their energy is what I think helps the child and the way it is. And children are basically willing to do anything that I think the parent does. They believe you, they trust you, they take everything for face value. Once they grow up and they realize that you didn't even believe in it, you were not real yourself, you were joking, you were taking it serious, they won't take it serious. And they just don't have a desire for it. So I just think the way to motivate children is not you tell them, go memorize your Qur'an and you're on the phone and talking to your friend, but put your phone down and sit down and do it with them. And parents, really, honestly, I don't want to offend anyone, but I have to be honest in this matter. If you're saying to your child, memorize the Qur'an, and you as a mother or father are not trying to memorize the Qur'an, if the Qur'an is so important and it's something everyone should do, then why are you not doing it? And don't you ever think to yourself that your child is not asking himself this question. He will ask himself, why are you not doing it, mom? Why are you not doing it, dad? What's the reason you're not taking it serious? You want me to take it serious. Why are you not doing it? If you want, because you tell them about the virtues. So show them that you're trying. Show them that you're dedicated. Show them the desire that you have for memorizing the Qur'an. I promise you, wallahi, you see it. I've realized one thing, and this is what I say to myself. My children's progress is in line with my hard work. I've realized whenever I'm slacking, nothing is intact. They will not take anything serious and they'll go forward. And when I have been trying my best to keep to my schedule, they've been doing the same with me. And so I realized the first enemy they have is me. Because they will do anything. If I stay up for 12 hours, memorize the Qur'an, they will do it with me. And if I just read it for 5-10 minutes, they do the same. So I think that's what I believe. Wallahu a'lam.
Ahsan Allahu ilaykum, Shaykh. So I had a couple of questions. I'm gonna give you a little break. I had a couple of questions I was gonna take, and maybe inshallah I'll just get your feedback on what you think about the answer. So there were two questions. One question was regarding Arabic for children and which books are recommended and so on. I personally feel that when it comes to learning Arabic, we sometimes make it more difficult for our kids than it needs to be. I like all of the Arabic books. All of them can be used. I don't have a preference. I mean, I've seen some people like the Medina books, some people like Al-Arabiya Bayna Yadayk and other things. But personally, I just found that we make it very hard for our children sometimes by focusing a lot on grammar points and forcing them to understand those grammar points in a lot of detail before they move on to the next issue or the next thing. I prefer generally to focus with young kids on vocabulary, so them being able to point at something and know the word for it, things like that, as well as them being exposed to the language, reading the language, hearing the language, is more important than them knowing the inner details of all these points of Arabic grammar. That's something that you can learn later. And I give an example of a native Arabic speaker, who's a child who grows up with parents who speak Arabic. And they grow up speaking Arabic fluently, and they don't ever sit and learn grammar rules like that. So it's not that it's a terrible thing, it has its place. But it's just that sometimes we see people stopping their children from learning because they're insistent on them learning these really complicated rules of grammar rather than just getting into the language and practicing it and speaking it and learning words for things and enjoying it until they get to the age where they can actually appreciate those grammar rules and actually implement them. They're very important. We can't understand Arabic without them, but too much of them, it just goes back down to that issue of nahu being like salt. You put too much salt on the food, it ruins the food. So just sometimes I feel like with our young kids, an emphasis on them going through certain books and certain points of grammar and not being able to progress unless they understand the intricacies of this particular word. I feel it takes longer for them to learn than having them enjoy the language, read some, little Islamic books for children in Arabic, practice with some different words, practice speaking and so on. And then slowly take these grammar rules as they are needed to progress to the next stage, inshallah. And that's the approach that I tried with AMAU's Arabic course, which is coming out soon, inshallah. I don't know, Sheikh, maybe you do it differently. I've seen people do it differently. Some people just, they love their kids to to learn those rules like that. What do you think, Sheikh?
MashaAllah, Allah Mubarak, is exactly what you said. It's the truth. Yani, we get any language, the grammar is like, it's for someone who has vocabulary in his system, so who knows how to speak. And I remember I studied linguistics in university, right? And I did that in my BAs and my masters. And they divide language into two, the receptive skills and the productive skills. And so the person's receptive skills is very good, which is that when they hear the language, they understand it. When they read it, it's very good. But their productive skill is bad, which is their speaking and their writing. And that's what the asl of the language is. What did the poet say? He said, لَسْتُ بِنَحْوِيٍّ يَلُوكُ لِسَانَهُ وَلَكِنِّي سَلِيقِيٌّ أَقُولُ فَأُعْرِبُ. He said, I'm not a grammarian, first of all. يَلُوكُ لِسَانَهُ, meaning my tongue doesn't have to follow مبتدأ and خبر and فعل and فاعل. I'm a saliqi. I'm an Arab. أقول, I say, فأعرب, it becomes grammatically correct. So that's how it normally should be. Even us in English, when I was teaching English to people who in the English language isn't their first language, when I was explaining to them the verb to be regarding I, he, she, it, you, and we. Those are 6, right? So when you say I and you say am, and then you say he, she, and it, you have to say is, right? And then when it's we and you, it's are. And then so you have to explain to them, we is plural, so you have to use are. He, she, it, you use the word is. Okay? And I use am. But then the question arises, what about you? It's a singular. Why are you using are for? And so here you're stuck. You're like, Which teaches you language is something, if somebody came up to you and said, you is, you'll say you're wrong. You can't probably grammatically explain that to them and say, let me do Arab for you here. You can't. So language is, I think the asl of it is you speak it. And that's how we are with English. We know if a person speaks English wrong, we'll be like, that's wrong, just don't do that. It sounds wrong. You may not be able to tell them the grammatical ruling and why is it wrong. I think Arabic is the same. If you're speaking it, that's the asl. And then grammar is it adds onto it. النحو يبسط باللسان الكلي. The Arabic grammar, it opens some of the things that, and examples that are given, for example, جاء زيد. A man has been taught so well Arabic grammar. He's been told that the fa'il is marfu'. Fa'ilun marfu'. Say it after me. Fa'ilun marfu'. That's what he was told. And he kept saying it after the teacher. Al-fa'il marfu'. Al-fa'il marfu'. He knows it now. And then he said, Ja'a Zaydan. And the teacher said, but why did you say Ja'a Zaydan? He said, I don't know. Did I not teach you a fa'il is what? He said, a fa'il is marfu'. He said, why do you say Ja'a Zaydan? So he knows the ruling, but he doesn't know, he can't apply it here. So that's what's happened with some people who've learned the grammar. They know it, but then applying it here has become a problem. And all the time it's what? Daraba Zaydun Amran. Zayd is always hitting Amr. There was a story that the scholars mentioned. The story was, why is Zayd always hitting Amr? Why is Zayd always in Amr? So a ruler from the rulers of Egypt, do you guys hear the story? He arrested the Nuhat if they didn't answer this question. Daraba Zaydun Amran. You guys have to explain why is Amr hit? Or you guys are going to, all the grammarians, they say, but it's an example. Go to prison. There was many other examples you could have given. Why Zayd, Daraba Zaydun Amra. Ala kullin, one grammarian was called from Dimashq and he was told to come and answer this question. If you don't answer this question, you to be in prison. So on the way, he thought about it. When he came to Egypt, he said to the ruler, I have an answer for you. He said, Amr is a kha'inun mujrim, yastahiqu ad-darb wa akthar. Amr is a deceptive individual, and he deserved not just beating, he deserved to be imprisoned and to be even killed. Why? Because Amr is a thief. How? He stole from Dawood. How did he steal Dawood? Dawood is pronounced with two vowels, right? And it's and Amr is pronounced with no waw, but there's a waw at the back. So Amr stole the waw of Dawood. That's why he deserves to be beaten. The ruler goes, okay, you're free to go. The point is that this example is always what the grammarians use. So they're limited in the examples they give. So the person, even when he comes to the real world, he doesn't know how to talk, or he doesn't know how to write or read, because all these examples are very limited. So Shaykh Na'amullah, grammar is for someone who has vocabulary at his disposal now.
BarakAllahu feekum, Sheikh. We have one more question, and then I think we have to finish up because it's getting very, very close to iftar time in the UK. But one question we wanted to finish off, because I thought this one was really important, is a parent who is currently distracting their kids with movies and gadgets, and they want to stop, and they want to get their kids away from these things. How can they change it without making their kids upset? Sheikh, maybe I'll get your thoughts on this for a couple of minutes, and I'll conclude with a minute, and then we'll wrap it up, inshallah.
Well, I think it has to be done. It has to be told the child it's over. It's going to stop. But there has to be an alternative. I'm talking about a lot of parents. When I looked at it, the reason why they give their children gadgets is that they don't have it in themselves to really sit down with their child and talk and converse with the child. And so they just want to distract the child so they can do other things. And so now this is something to the parents. This you're doing to your child is really crippling his thinking and his mind. So get away from what you're preoccupying yourself with and you're doing, and you're distracting your child by giving him a gadget. Spend time with him, talk to him. The kids I've seen that are the smartest kids are parents, not even religiously. I'm talking about generally smart kids, are kids who speak to their mum and dads a lot. They're not being distracted with anything. The father and the mother can just keep talking to him about everything. Do you know this happened today? Do you know this was, I went to the shop and they for example, the other day I came and I went to a shop. I took my oldest daughter with me. We went to a shop. When I went to the shop, I gave 100 dirhams for something I wanted to buy. So 100 dirham is money that's stuck together, right? So we bought the thing, and then my daughter's like, they gave you more money back. How? So because she can see the notes are more now. Okay. How? It literally took me an hour to explain to her that this is not the case. The money that we just gave has reduced. But she's like, you got more notes, Dad. You only gave one note. She gave you more notes back. You see, it's frustrating to explain it. So some parents would be like, you know what, forget it. And they'll just, no, don't forget it. Why are you going to forget it? This is something you have to explain to your child. He doesn't know, it's fair. I'll explain it. Do you understand now? No. So what I had to do is I had to rip papers. I wrote 100 on one paper. And I said, this is 100. And then I wrote 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 on so many papers. Do you understand? So I said, give me the 100. And I said, this cup costs 10 dirhams. Literally, now I said, look at what's written on it and don't look at the papers that you're counting. The point I'm trying to come to is, these things are a must. You have to engage with your children, spend time, correct them, tell them why, explain the reasons behind what you said. And I think the child grows mentally, and you nurture his brain and mind. And even the benefits that you reap from all of this is you have a mature child. And I think that's the most important thing. Now, if you take your child away from television, all of this, substitute it with something. And I think the best thing to substitute it with is Qur'an and family conversational time. So let's talk. Let me tell you about my life when I was young, what I used to do. That's I tell them those things. I tell them stories about the prophets and the righteous people. And Allah knows best, subhanahu wa ta'ala.
BarakAllahu feekum, Shaykh. Ahsanallahu ilaykum. I think the only one thing I wanted to add to that is that if a parent has made a really obvious and really wrong decision, where that decision is being seen by the child, that, look, I told you it's okay to watch movies, the parent has to explain to the child they made a mistake. Okay, if you make a mistake that's private, you don't have to share that with your children. But if you told them it's okay to watch movies and then you decide it's not okay to watch movies, you're probably going to have to explain to them that, look, I got it wrong. And I used to think these things were just a good distraction and it's harmless. And now I've realized that I'm wrong, and I've realized it's haram, and I've realized that it's harming you and it's harming me. So that's why we have to stop. And that kind of mature conversation has to be there. Otherwise, the child is like, look, how is it allowed one day and not allowed the next? In any case, I think that is definitely all we have time for, because in the UK, at least where I am, we have just a couple of minutes left until iftar. I guess everywhere is different, but for where I am, we only have a couple of minutes left. So inshallah, we'd like to wrap up there. I would just like to extend my thanks to Sheikh Abdul Rahman for sharing all of those benefits with us. It was amazing. And inshallah, we hope that all of the parents benefited and enjoyed the session. And that's what Allah Azza wa Jalla made easy for us to mention. And Allah knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Sheikh Muhammad.
Yes, Sheikh.
Inshallah, I don't mind, inshallah. If the parents still have more questions they want to ask, inshallah ta'ala, whoever's here in the UAE or other countries who have more questions, inshallah ta'ala, we can take a few more minutes, inshallah ta'ala. You, Sheikh, may Allah honor you for dunya wal akhirah, inshallah. His never-ending mercy onto you, Sheikh. May Allah make you a beacon of knowledge, and I really love you for the sake of Allah, Sheikh Muhammad.
Allah bless you, Sheikh. May the one for whose sake you love me love you too.
BarakAllahu.
Inshallah, in that case, I'm going to head away, and I will just leave you with the parents, Sheikh, and for as long as you can manage. BarakAllahu feekum.
Wa feeka barakallah, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, inshallah ta'ala, parents, any more questions, inshallah ta'ala? So I'm going to start with the question that was sent to me. Does that mean a child should finish learning to read the Qur'an before hifd? Yes. So the first question was, does the child have to finish learning to read Arabic from learning to read Arabic before hifd? Yes. Not every Arabic, but I mean the Mus'haf, the Qur'an. They need to know how to read the Qur'an. There's kids who can read the Qur'an but can't read other Arabic books, by the way. That's something you have to understand. So separate one from the other. There are people who can read Arabic but can't read the Mus'haf of the Qur'an. Okay? Because the Qur'an has its own calligraphy. Okay? So it has its own style of writing. But generally, anyone who can read the Mus'haf can generally read a lot of Arabic texts. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. What's the best way to memorization if the child is not a fluent reader or doesn't know how to read the Qur'an yet? Again, as I said, the child should start with reading from the Mus'haf and learn the alphabets and how they connect. He has to learn that. He also should learn the 6 naughty letters: alif, waw, dal, ra. And the naughty letters that don't connect from that side, he also has to know that. Also, listening to the Qur'an. Getting a shaykh and listening to his Qur'an, that should be something that parents should focus on, inshallah ta'ala. Listening is of great benefit, inshallah ta'ala. I homeschool, and to get jobs done without being distracted, I give the kids movies and gadgets to keep them busy. How can I change this whilst keeping them happy? I think we've answered this question. Sheikh Tim has put this question to me. We've answered that question. Sheikh, sometimes one does not have access to one's Mus'haf when out. We've answered that question. I have paused my memorization to catch up with my revision. I do my revision daily as well as my reading. But is it all right for me to pause?
Yeah.
I was told to do that by my teacher. I've also answered that question as well. Okay, we're going to start from the bottom, inshallah. How about memorizing isolated ayat as dalil for aqidah points or fiqh? Now that's another discussion when it comes to istishhadat al-nusus, finding text as evidences for matters. That is different to memorization. Somebody could have memorized the entire Qur'an and never do a mistake from Baqarah to Nas, but then they can't get an ayah out of the Mus'haf like that. That's a skill. The scholars, they call that sur'atul istidrak. Speed to get it out. And those, definitely, I would encourage certain books to focus on them, like kutub, like Thalathatul Usul and Qawa'id al-Arba' and Kitab al-Tawheed for fiqh, the aqidah. The Shaykh, he has quwwah in bringing out ayat like that. Al-Wasitiyah, for example, the verses that he mentions and how he uses those verses, powerful. Fiqh books, for example, there are kutub al-hadith that you have to memorize in order to get all of that from, like Bulugh al-Maram and things like that. But that's outside the memorization of the Qur'an. Okay, there are people who can do the verses like that, but can't read the entire Qur'an like that. So it's both sides. It's there. What is the best way of revision for a hafiz? I think we've touched on that as well. Can you help us with how to manage time with listening to my kids' hifz? One is in Surah Al-Imran, and the other is in the 28th juz. However, by the time I am done listening to my older child, I'm already very tired, to listen to the younger one. If I switch it the other way, the young one is so slow and tends to whine a lot during her time frame. But she consumes a lot of time, which impacts our homeschooling schedule. BarakAllahu khairan. This is true. This happens a lot. The children are not the same when it comes to speed. So genuinely, both parents should try to take this together. Like the father should take some of the kids and the mother takes some of the kids, and that's divided. And like you both focus on it. If that's not available, remember one thing: even if the child is not reading to you, but they're listening to it, it's going to go to their long-term memory, inshallah ta'ala. So even when you're focusing on your older child, the older one, get the younger one to listen and not just sit there and just wonder and look up this ceiling and don't think to yourself, by telling him to read, he will read or she would read. Let them listen to the Shaykh Muhammad Khalil Husari or Mishawi headphones, and don't let them look around. Make them look at the Mus'haf, because they can read from the Mus'haf now until you finish with this one. Because when they come to you now, something is there. They've heard things. So they will read a bit better, and over time there's going to be a big improvement in that regard. How should we balance the memorization of Qur'an with the memorization of Hadith, Aqidah, Fiqh? Any recommendations on this? A child, if he has reached halfway in the Qur'an, then I would say introduce other books to memorize. Before Surah Al-Kahf, don't really introduce much. The Qur'an is the first priority. Actually, if you can finish the Qur'an, then go for other books. I would say that's the best. That's the best. But don't put so much things together. You need the Qur'an clean, well done, and then you move on to the next book. Because remember, whenever he moves on to the next book, the Qur'an's always going to be revision. Now, I have a baby who is 2 months old. What can I do now, today, as a mother, to ensure she grows up to be a hafidha? Good. Don't give her any gadgets, cartoons to watch, things to watch. Don't do any of that. I promise you. You think it's a 2-year-old month child? They already know the sound of their mother. So many things are already in place. Also, when you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're in the house, you're dressing up, just put Qur'an on. I memorized Surah Al-Taha by my mother playing it in the house, all of it. The entire Surah Al-Taha, I memorized it from that. Nobody taught me Surah Taha. No teacher taught me from beginning to end. My mum just loved the recitation of the Shaykh, and it was needed on every day. And I'd memorized the whole surah like that. When I came to it, the Shaykh was like, what? So when people don't understand that these things, you memorize it like that. I made my children memorize books on just journeys. My son memorized Lamitul Af'al on rights. Lamitul Af'al is one of the hardest books when it comes to memorization. He memorized it by driving. So he can fit things in like that. It doesn't always have to be in the set of a room or a classroom. Kids pick up fast. Okay? Do you recommend a parent to teach their child the Qur'an if they know, or get a teacher? I do both. Do both. I did that mistake, but I think I can do everything. But with the days I'm sick, the days I'm tired, the days I have to go out, I would encourage you to get a teacher and to also you be the teacher as well. So it's like a double effort. And as a parent, you get away with it by saying, you know what, I'm going to tell the teacher off you. You know, so that's the person they are going to be accounted to. And you give the teacher, say, put pressure on him, make him, and I will make sure he memorizes it for you. Teachers love a child who's ready, prepared, ready to sit in front of the teacher. The teacher will give his heart to his child. He will open up, and that's what you need from the teacher. And also it's fun, really, wallah, it's fun. I mean, my hifd of the Qur'an improved because of my kids. It improves, you improve. They catch you out, you catch them out today, you're like, you're going to do your subah, you're going to be sharp. And Allah knows best, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have to enjoy it as a parent and look forward to it. When kids have around one juz or more to memorize daily, do they need to recite this all to someone? Or is the best way to memorize to read it or listen to it? No, they have to read it by memory to the Shaykh. That juz, they have to read it by themselves. Okay? They have to do it by themselves and read it to you daily. But you are going to have like 4 or 5 juz going back and forth. Ayah. Now, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is your advice for a parent who thinks her child are capable of memorizing more? They memorize 1 page a week right now, and I have memorized 3 ajza this way. However, when I try to add more, they get scared before even trying and say things like this, things like I can't. Again, I don't think more than a day, 2 pages more than a day, I don't think that should be done. I think 1 page a week, 1 page a day, sorry, is fine. It's very good. Maximum go for 2 pages. Because what happens is, they go fast, but then the muraja'ah becomes hard, the weak. And you have to stopping them all the time. So it's better doing it slowly, but surely. Slowly, but you do it surely. That's better in my opinion. I did 4 pages, 6 pages for a time. And those parts were the weakest parts. Then I stopped one and I said, you know, let's go for our 1 page. Why are we rushing for? Let's go slowly. BarakAllahu feekum, Ustad. My brother loves to hear only one Shaykh all the time, which is fine, but his tajweed becomes unclear and things like that. Is that okay? What should I do? When it comes to the children memorizing the Qur'an, I don't encourage them to listen to these melodious reciters. They can do that once they finish the Qur'an. But when they're young, they have to listen to these reciters only. And I think that's something that the parents should put pressure on the child with, that you listen to these certain reciters and there's no other reciter you can listen to until your tajweed is good. Now, okay. I homeschooled in Middle East and I feel like I have the capacity here compared to when I was in UK to focus solely on hifd and Arabic. What is your opinion on this? The child, I believe personally, my children, I don't focus on fahm for them, understanding. If they're given a class and they sit in it, that's good. But I don't focus too much on fahm and all of that. Yeah, understanding. I know they're young and they just need to memorize everything. I need them to memorize every black on every white. because it's one of the things I regret. I wanted my memorization to be sharp, and these are things I regret. Understanding comes. The older I go, the more I understand. But the weaker my memorization becomes, the older I grow. I can't memorize what I used to memorize fast. So I focus on memorization more and less understanding. And that means Arabic. I don't focus on anything other than hifz. So they read and they write Arabic, but I want them to memorize the Qur'an. I want them to memorize hadith books. I want them to memorize everything. Because I saw the people who memorize the Qur'an, the Arabic is good. Qur'an opens vocabulary for you. You've got vocabulary at your disposal. Once the child reaches the age of 12 onwards, I think the parents should start durus and lessons. And by the way, this surah that you memorize, this is what it means. The tafsir of the Qur'an, the hadiths, the fiqh, the aqidah, all of that. 12 onwards, the child should start taking that. But before that, memorize everything. Because he's not mukallaf aslan. No burden on him. And Allah knows best. Remember, if you put Arabic in and then Qur'an in, all the time, it's going to be, and he's got school work to do. Just focus on one thing at another. What did the poet say? وإن تريد تحصيل فن تممه وعن سواه قبل الانتهاء ما وفي ترادف العلوم المنعجاء إن توأمان استبقا لا يخرجا صح؟ فشراكة السيدس وإن تريد تحصيل فن تممه. If you want to really master a science, complete it and don't preoccupy yourself with something else. Don't do too many things at the same time. A mother, if she's got twins in her stomach, she has to give birth to one and then the next one comes out. She can't let them all out both at the same time. وفي ترادف العلوم المنعجاء إن توأمان استبقا لا يخرجا. If two children say, I both want to come out at the same time, they won't be able to. So that's what they say. And these people are masters when it comes to memorization. So they finish one field and then they move it to the next field, and then the next field, and then the next field, next field. One of the things I never mentioned, which I did for a period of time, but then I didn't do after that, was the concept of writing. Yani writing the Qur'an. When we were in Somalia, we were forced to write the Qur'an. And the teacher would recite it and you write it. And I think writing is also another thing that helps with memorization. Anything you write, my teacher used to say, it's like you read it 5 times. Once you wrote something, it's like 5 times you read it. If you write another time, it's like 5 times you read it. So writing is very good. It sticks to the memory. What is the best age for a child to start? As soon as he starts talking. And I think at the age of 4 is where the age my children started their memorization of the Qur'an. How to punish them if they don't stick to the schedule, considering that they are too young. Take away privileges from them, things they like, things they want to do. Make sure that you reward them when they do good, so then they look forward to that. And also take away from them when they don't, what they don't want, what they like. For example, on the weekend, if they like going out with you and they have fun, say then you're not going to go. So my children, they had horse riding classes. So then I would say, you're not going to go to your horse classes. You're banned. Mamnu', this week you're not going to go. Oh, he's emotional. Okay, good. And all of that. Allah knows best. There was a period of time where the discipline was a bit stricter, but this one is what's more effective. Taking away from them what they like and what they appreciate. It punishes them more. And they feel more angry and upset because then, and you say, this is ذَلِكَ بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ. That is what your hand has put forward. It's your fault. You've done this to yourself. What have you learned from this? And what are you going to do next time? You see a big change in that regard. What should be the main motivation for us as parents for getting kids to memorize the Qur'an? Wallahi, the honor that your child will bring for you as a parent in this world and in the hereafter. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْفَعُ بِهَذَا الْقُرْآنِ أَقْوَامًا وَيَضَعُ بِهَا آخَرِينَ. Allah raises your child in this world before the hereafter. And look what you've done. الدال على الخير كفاعله. All this which your child has memorized, you get the reward for it. And you get the opportunity of the hadith, إِذَا مَاتَ ابْنُ آدَمَ انْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. If a person dies, their righteous deeds comes to an end, except 3. And from the 3 is what? وَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُو لَهُ. A righteous child that makes dua for you. There was a great scholar by the name of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Somali. He was a teacher of Sheikh Muqbil and many other great scholars. Even Sheikh Salih al-Rushaymi and others, he was their teacher. And what happened was, Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Somali, they said he couldn't have children. When the Ethiopians came to Somalia, some of them, what they did to the people over there was, in some parts, they castrated the men. They took out veins from their testicles, so they can't have children. It was a form of fighting with these people to cut them off, never carry on. And he was from the people that this happened to. And he couldn't have children. Rahimahullah rahmatan wasi'ah. He passed away a few years back. And one day he said, I've never ever wanted children. Never. It's not something I ever looked for. Dunya and anything, I never felt it. Until one day that I came to the masjid. And I prayed behind the father and the son. The son was leading the prayer and he's reached to the ayah in Surah Ibrahim, where Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says, رَبِّ اجْعَلْنِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي رَبَّنَا وَتَقَبَّلْ دُعَاءَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْحِسَابُ وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ اللَّهَ غَافِلًا عَمَّا يَعْمَلُ الظَّالِمُونَ إِنَّمَا يُؤَخِّرُهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ تَشْخَصُ فِيهِ الْأَبْصَارُ مُهْطِعِينَ مُقْنِعِي رُءُوسِهِمْ لَا يَرْتَدُّ إِلَيْهِمْ طَرْفُهُمْ وَأَفْئِدَتُهُمْ هَوَاءٌ. He reached that point and he said, I cried. I realized the virtue of a child who's memorized. The father's praying behind his son. The first half, the father led the Tarawih, and the next second half, the son led it. He said, it touched my heart. That your child can be a half of who leads the people in prayer and gets the reward of the people he's leading. And you get the reward for it. And the khayr that comes from that. وَإِنَّ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ أَوْثَقُ شَافِعٍ وَأَغْنَى غَنَاءٍ وَهِبًا مُتَفَضِّلًا وَخَيْرُ جَلِيسٍ لَا يُمَلُّ حَدِيثُهُ وَتَرْدَادُهُ يَزْدَادُ فِيهِ تَجَمُّلًا وَحَيْثُ الْفَتَى يَرْتَعُ فِي ظُلُمَاتِهِ مِنَ الْقَبْرِ يَلْقَاهُ سَنًا مُتَهَلِّلًا هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا والداك عليهما ملابس أنوار من التاج والحلى. This is ضعيف, by the way. That the parents are going to wear crown and for their children. That hadith is actually weak. But there's nothing greater that you can give your child. Look, brothers and sisters, listen, wallahi, this is the thing I always say to myself, and I say to my children. There is nothing greater on this earth than the speech of Allah. It is the only thing that we have that's not created. Everything else is created. Every individual is makhluk. Allah's kalam is not makhluk. It's the only thing that is غير مخلوق. So why are we not? يعني جاء النبيون بالآيات فانصرمت وجئتنا بحكيم غير منصرم آيات كلما طال المدى جدد يبينون جمال العتق والقدم. Every prophet came with something for his people to believe in him. Musa came with a stick. Isa alayhi salam was able to bring the dead out of the graves, or he would make the dead come alive. Bi-idhnillah, with the permission of Allah Ta'ala. But when Musa went and when Isa left, their miracle is gone. Where is that miracle? It's gone. Like in Nabi Muhammad's miracle still stands ila yawmina hadha, the Qur'an. So that's why I say, brothers and parents, there's nothing greater, wallahi, a parent can give their child than the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing greater than that. So give your child the Qur'an. First thing, Imam al-Awza'i was mentioned that if somebody came to him and said, I want to seek knowledge, if it was a kid, he will say to you, come, akhadta min al-Qur'an. If he says, I've memorized the Qur'an kamilatan, he will say, read yusikumullahu fi awladikum lidhakari mithla hadhil unthayayn. Why would he say that? It's one of the hardest ayat. يوصيكم الله في أولادكم ولكم نصف ما ترك يستفتونك في النساء. These are آيات المواريث, the ayats that speak about inheritance. If they weren't able to read it, he will say, irji', go back to your house, learn the Qur'an and come to me. I won't teach you hadith unless you learn the Qur'an. Yeah, wallah. Scholars never used to teach somebody knowledge if they didn't memorize the Qur'an. If they didn't finish and memorize the Qur'an. So you have to memorize the Qur'an and learn the Qur'an, or else, if you look at the Qur'an, Allah says, بَلْ هُ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. Where's the Qur'an meant to be in? Some of the scholars took from that verse. What did they take that from that verse? They took from that verse that the person who memorized the Qur'an is from Ahlul Ilm. They said, بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم. ولذلك some of the scholars they said anyone who memorized the Qur'an is من أهل العلم, from the people of knowledge. Allah has mentioned that for them. صح? So take the Qur'an. And Allah تبارك وتعالى, He said to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, إنه لذكر لك ولقومك وسوف تسألون. ما معنى وإنه لذكر لك؟ Ibn Jarir Tabari says, وَإِنَّهُ لَشَرَفٌ لَكَ وَلِقَوْمِكَ. Muhammad, this Qur'an is an honor for you and your people. And the person is honored by having the Qur'an. وَسَوْفَ تُسْأَلُونَ is the blessing you'll be asked about Yawm al-Qiyamah. صح? Anyone who prays Taraweeh right now behind the Imam and listens to the Qur'an be recited, the beauty, الله نزل أحسن الحديث كتابا متشابها مثانية تقشعر منه جلود الذين يخشون ربهم ثم تلين جلودهم وقلوبهم إلى ذكر الله. You feel it in your heart, the beauty of it. Imagine that was your child that you're praying behind. So that's the greatest motivation I think you can have as a parent, to give this to your child and to benefit your child. You're going to be the first person that falls under خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. One of the narrators that narrated this hadith is who? Who narrated it from Uthman ibn Affan? Abd al-Rahman al-Sulami, Abdullah ibn Habib. Abdullah ibn Habib, they said 60 years he sat in a chair in Kufa. 60 years he was sitting there. And he was teaching the what? The Qur'an. And he said, Wallahi alladhi aq'adani fi maq'adi hada. What made me sit in this chair and this place that I'm sitting in Kufa is the hadith I heard from my teacher, Uthman ibn Affan. That the best amongst you. And but the word, by the way, khayrukum, it's actually a superlative. It's akhyarukum sighatul mubalagha. سقطت الألف, the alif was dropped بكثرة التكرار, because of the repetition of it. The best of you, there's no one better than the one who teaches the Qur'an, the one who learns the Qur'an and he teaches the Qur'an. Do you know one of the people he taught the Qur'an to? Hassan and Hussein. Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami was the teacher of Hassan and Hussein, the two grandsons of what? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They used to sit under his feet and they used to take the knowledge of the Qur'an from him. He used to recite it and he would listen. He's the one who said, حدثنا الذين كانوا يقرؤوننا القرآن. The ones who taught us the Qur'an, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Uthman ibn Affan and Ubay, they told us that they never كانوا لا يتجاوزون 10 آيات. They will never go past 10 verses. حتى يحفظوها, until they memorize it. وعملوا بما فيها, and they acted upon it. صح؟ فتعلمنا العلم والعمل والإيمان. They learn ilm and amal and iman all at once together. So this is, I think, the best thing you can give your child, and the greatest thing, I think, wallahi, to have the book of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, subhanahu wa ta'ala. My son is now a teenager and I now realize the importance of Qur'an, but he is not interested as I am lately. What shall I do now? Always advice. And one of the things I realize parents don't realize is the dua of a parent. The dua of a parent is very powerful and it's very great. They make so much dua. Fi duja al-layl, in the last third of the night, wake up to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala and beg Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. But one thing I'm going to tell you, brothers and sisters, all of this which you're doing for your child is just a means. What really will come out of it all is only in Allah's hands. It doesn't mean that the child that has memorized the Qur'an is going to be righteous. It doesn't mean that. Al-umuru kulluhu biyadillah. You're just this is your effort. That's just your effort. That's why with all of these efforts that we're mentioning, we're not really mentioning the side of what? Ad-du'a, ad-du'a. Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He told the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ رُوحًا مِّنْ أَمْرِنَا. We have sent down the Qur'an onto you. ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب ولا الإيمان ولكن جعلناه نورا نهدي به من نشاء من عبادنا وإنك لتهدي إلى صراط مستقيم. Allah is saying to the Prophet, we sent the Qur'an on you, but we didn't place guidance in your hands. Meaning you're not the one who can place the truth into people's hearts. So just because we have the Qur'an, it doesn't mean we can force it into people's hearts. No. Allah is the one who does that. إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء. You can't guide the person you like. Allah is the one who guides who He wishes, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he is the one, he knows the one that's going to be guided. So all this what we're doing with our children and the effort that we're exerting, it's in Allah's hand whether it's going to be accepted from us or not. And it's also in Allah's hand whether this is going to soak into their minds and their hearts. I've seen parents who put every effort in, but then it went sideways. It's all biyadillah. We just have to humble ourselves and belittle ourselves for Allah tabarak wa ta'ala and beg Him. And at the end of the day, we need to remember, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah does not forsake the deeds and the good work of the righteous people. I'm going to conclude there, inshallah ta'ala. I ask Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He forgives our private and our public affairs for us. And I ask Allah tabarak wa ta'ala أن يغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم اغفر لنا هزلنا وجدنا وخطأنا وعبدنا وكل ذلك عندنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا، اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا، اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.